I stood inside the main 5,000 square foot glasshouse at Willow Creek Nursery, the humid air rich with the scent of damp soil and blooming flora. I was 67 years old, holding the solid brass watering can my late husband Arthur had given me decades ago, as we carefully tended a rare orchid hybrid he had spent 7 years perfecting. Footsteps echoed across the flagstone path as my daughter-in-law, Melissa, swept into the greenhouse, accompanied by her elder sister Brittany. Melissa gestured grandly up toward the 1,200 square foot mezzanine loft above our main potting bay, her voice brimming with absolute certainty. She announced that Brittany would be moving into the loft next month, completely rent-free, to set up a private sewing atelier. Behind them, my son Ryan trailed silently, picking dead leaves off a wooden workbench while avoiding my gaze entirely. I slowly set the brass watering can onto the glass display table, feeling the cold metal beneath my fingers. I looked directly into Melissa's expectant eyes and delivered my answer in a single, unwavering word. No. The cool afternoon breeze rustled through the open vents of the glasshouse, but inside, the air felt suffocatingly thick. I looked at Melissa, who stood with her chin tilted upward, her posture radiating a smooth, practiced entitlement. My mind flashed back to 1988. The grueling spring Arthur and I built Willow Creek Nursery from the mud up. We had taken out a $45,000 agricultural loan, risking every cent we possessed. For 7 years, we worked 14-hour days, hauling heavy bags of potting soil, building the timber framing with our bare hands, and nursing delicate seedlings through freezing winter nights. Every single brick, every pane of glass, and every inch of this 5,000 square foot glasshouse was bought with our sweat, sacrifice, and silent resilience. When a family member spends decades quietly bearing the load without complaint, self-absorbed relatives begin to view that quiet endurance not as strength, but as weakness. They mistake patience for passivity. In their minds, anything you possess isn't something you earned through blood and sweat, but rather an unassigned asset waiting for them to claim. They construct an elaborate internal narrative where their sudden desires supersede your lifetime of hard work, convincing themselves that taking from you is simply the natural order of things. "Catherine, you have to be reasonable about this," Melissa said, her voice dripping with artificial empathy as she smoothed her coat. "Brittany just finalized her divorce 3 weeks ago. She needs a fresh start, and she needs to save $1,800 a month on residential rent. The 1,200 square foot mezzanine loft up there is completely empty. It's practically sitting there useless while you potter around down here with your plants." Before I could process her audacity, Melissa reached into her leather handbag, pulled out a yellow vinyl tape measure, and snapped it open with a sharp click. She stepped toward the primary nursery display racks, where Arthur's prize-winning orchid hybrid sat blooming in rich hues of purple and gold. She unrolled the tape measure right across the top shelf, jostling a fragile pot, attempting to calculate how much floor space Brittany's heavy industrial sewing equipment would occupy. The sight of her laying tape over Arthur's legacy broke whatever silence I had held. I stepped forward instantly, putting my body directly between her and the orchid racks. I reached out and caught Melissa's wrist with a firm, unyielding grip, stopping the tape measure mid-air. "Put that away," I said, my voice low, flat, and steady. "You do not measure spaces in my business, and you do not assign rooms in a home that does not belong to you." Melissa blanched, staring at my hand on her wrist before snapping her arm back in irritation. She turned to my son, her eyes wide with manufactured shock. "Ryan, are you going to let her put her hands on me? Look at how she's reacting." Ryan finally found his voice, stepping forward with his hands raised defensively, refusing to meet my eyes directly. "Mom, please, don't make a scene," he pleaded softly. "Melissa is just trying to help her sister. You're 67 years old and living here alone. The stairs are getting harder for you, and honestly, a widow doesn't need 5,000 square feet of space all to herself. It's wasteful." "I mow my own lawn, Ryan," I answered quietly. "I manage 30 commercial plant orders a week, and I walk these stairs every morning at 5. My independence is not a problem for you to solve." Melissa let out a sharp, dramatic sigh, folding her arms tight across her chest. "Well, it doesn't matter what you think, Catherine," she sneered. "We already called Brittany's landlord last Tuesday and formally terminated her apartment lease starting the 1st of next month. She's moving her things out regardless. So unless you want your family member sleeping on the street, you'll need to clear out the loft." The following Tuesday, at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, I walked into the glasshouse foyer to find 4 massive blue plastic storage totes stacked against the potting benches. They were heavy, bulging at the lids, and filled with industrial spools of thread, fabric bolts, and sewing gear. Brittany's name was written across each lid in black permanent marker. Melissa had dropped them off unannounced while I was out in the retail yard, treating my business as an unpaid storage unit. I didn't scream, and I didn't call Melissa to argue. I walked straight into the tool shed, wheeled out my heavy-duty hand truck, and loaded the plastic totes onto the metal frame 2 at a time. My arms strained and my back ached, but I wheeled all 4 totes straight out the double doors, down the gravel path, and left them under the covered front gate beneath the porch overhang where they would stay dry if it rained. Then I pulled out my phone and sent Ryan a short text message. "Collect your items from the gate before 6 p.m. They will not remain on nursery property." No anger, no lecture, just facts. Less than 20 minutes later, Ryan called, his voice thick with frustration. "Mom, you didn't have to put Brittany's things outside on the driveway." She was just trying to get organized ahead of time. "I certainly did," I replied evenly. "If someone stores belongings in a private business without permission, they are assuming ownership they do not possess. The gate locks at 6. "They're just boxes, Mom," he snapped. "They are the beginning," I said softly, and hung up. He arrived alone that evening at 5:30, loading the heavy totes into the trunk of his car without coming inside to look me in the eye. I believed the point had been made. I was wrong. 2 mornings later, at 5:30 in the morning, I woke to the distinct, pressurized hum of water rushing through high-volume pipes. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my coat, and hurried out to the glass house. Water was spraying wildly across the floor, drowning my delicate orchid seedling bay. Someone had manually overridden our $25,000 automated irrigation system, flooding the most fragile plants in the nursery. I stepped into the control room and found Melissa standing at the digital interface panel, holding 2 large tote bags. "What are you doing?" I demanded, stepping into her path. Melissa flinched, looking startled before forcing a patronizing smile. "Oh, Catherine, good morning. I just came in early to start clearing out the storage shelves underneath the mezzanine so we can set up Brittany's cutting tables." I pressed a button on the panel to turn the overhead lights on, but I guess it turned on the water spray instead. "How did you get past the security gate?" I asked, my blood running cold. "Where did you get the key?" "Ryan gave me his emergency key ages ago, and I used the 4-digit PIN panel at the side gate," she said dismissively, waving her hand. 1988, right? The year you opened? It was easy." "Give me the key, Melissa," I said, holding out my hand. She stared at me, her face tightening. "Seriously? It's an emergency spare. We're family." "Family does not enter my business at 5 in the morning to override my water systems and destroy my stock," I said, stepping closer. "Give me the key now." With an angry scoff, she snatched the brass key from her ring and slammed it onto the glass counter. "You're being completely mental," she shouted, spinning around and storming out through the wet aisle. "One day you'll regret pushing everyone who cares about you away." "I don't push people away, Melissa," I called out after her as the heavy glass door slammed shut. "I simply refuse to be trampled." By 8 in the morning, a commercial locksmith arrived at Willow Creek Nursery. I paid $800 to have heavy-duty brass deadbolts installed on every single door, and had the digital control panel reprogrammed with a complex, encrypted security code that only I possessed. When the locksmith handed me 3 brand-new keys, I locked 2 in my office safe and put the 3rd on my personal ring. No one else would ever hold a key to my sanctuary again. On Friday morning, I drove into town and parked in front of First National Bank. For 5 years, ever since my grandson Noah was born, followed 2 years later by my granddaughter Maya, I had deposited $500 on the first of every month into an account Ryan had set up. It was meant to cover soccer fees, ballet shoes, winter coats, and savings for their future. It was never an obligation. It was a gift born of love. I sat down in the office of the senior account manager and asked for a comprehensive review of the transfer history. When the printed statements were placed in front of me, my stomach dropped. The money had never touched an account for the children. The moment my $500 landed each month, it was immediately wire transferred out to pay off Melissa's high-end boutique credit cards, salon appointments, and luxury spa packages. Every single dollar intended for my grandchildren's well-being had been siphoned away to fund Melissa's vanity. I closed the automatic recurring transfer from my personal account on the spot. In its place, I established 2 irrevocable custodial UTMA trust accounts, one for Noah and one for Maya, naming myself as the sole custodian. Every dollar I intended to give them would now go directly into these locked accounts, compounding interest year after year. Neither Ryan nor Melissa could touch a single penny or redirect the funds. The money would remain completely frozen until each child turned 18 years old. The first day of the new month arrived with bright autumn sunshine. I was sitting in my glasshouse office, sipping black coffee when my phone rang. Melissa's name flashed on the screen, and I answered calmly. "Catherine! Where is the money?" she demanded, before I could even say hello, her voice shrill with rage. "The $500 for the kids didn't hit our checking account today. It wasn't supposed to," I replied, taking a slow sip of coffee. "What does that mean?" she shouted. "We already put down a deposit for Noah's private tutoring and Maya's gymnastics. We need that cash right now." I have established 2 custodial trust accounts for Noah and Maya at First National Bank, I said evenly. "From this day forward, every cent I give them goes directly into their future. When they turn 18, they will receive every dollar." "You have no right to do that without asking us," Melissa screamed. "You're punishing us. This is pure revenge." "It is not revenge, Melissa," I answered, with absolute quiet. "It is responsibility. A gift is a gesture of grace, not an entitlement. Family does not spend money meant for children on their own credit card bills before the check even clears. When we cut off toxic financial channels that are disguised as family obligations, those who exploited us will always accuse us of malice. They rely on your guilt to keep the pipeline open. They treat your generosity as a debt you owe them and brand your boundaries as cruelty. But standing firm is not punishment. It is the ultimate act of self-respect and protection." 3 days later, Ryan came to Willow Creek Nursery alone. He walked into the glass house with dark circles under his eyes and his shoulders slouched in defeat. We sat across from each other on 2 wooden crates near the potting bay. "Mom," he whispered, staring down at his calloused hands. "Melissa is furious. She says, if you don't unlock that $500 a month and give her access, she's going to stop bringing Noah and Maya here. She won't let you see them anymore." I looked directly into my son's eyes, refusing to let my voice waver. "Is that a threat, Ryan?" He lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. "I just want everyone to be happy, Mom." "You cannot keep everyone happy when one person demands complete control," I said gently. "I love those children more than my own life. But if someone uses grandchildren as leverage in a financial shakedown, the problem isn't the grandmother protecting her boundaries. Think very carefully about the precedent you are allowing your wife to set." 2 weeks of stillness passed, but it was the calm before a storm. The autumn leaves turned brilliant shades of crimson and amber across the nursery property. On a Sunday afternoon, just after 2 o'clock, the gravel driveway crunched beneath the tires of 2 vehicles. I stood by the main glasshouse entrance as Melissa stepped out, followed by Ryan and Brittany, who hovered awkwardly near the rear bumper of her car. Melissa didn't ask if I was open for a chat. She marched right into the retail office, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. Ryan followed, keeping his head down, looking as though he wished the ground would open up and swallow him whole. "We're here to resolve everything once and for all, Catherine," Melissa announced, placing her hands flat on my counter. "This has gone on long enough. We had our attorney draft a binding agreement to make sure this transition is completely above board. I am not negotiating my life or my business on a Sunday afternoon, Melissa, I replied quietly. If you came for tea, you're welcome. If you came with legal demands, today's visit is over. You're going to hear us out, she snapped, pulling a set of heavy, notarized documents from her leather folder and sliding them across the counter. This is an asset transfer proposal, Melissa said, her smile tightening into a smug, triumphant line. Willow Creek Nursery currently holds a commercial flower supply contract with the Regional Hospitality Group worth $180,000 a year. 2014-4. You're 67 years old, Catherine. You shouldn't be managing that kind of volume. We're proposing that you legally transfer the commercial supply contract directly to my corporate event management firm. It will save everyone a massive tax burden later, and you can step back from operations entirely. I stared at the white paper, reading the bold headings. Then Melissa pulled out a second document, a printed architectural floor plan. And where exactly do you expect me to live if your firm takes over primary operations? I asked. Melissa pointed a manicured fingernail at the bottom corner of the diagram. The 400-square-foot basement supply room directly beneath this office. We can renovate it into a cozy apartment. It makes total practical sense. The mezzanine loft and the 3 upper rooms in the main farmhouse will be needed for Ryan, myself, and Brittany's atelier. You won't have to navigate the main stairs anymore. I looked past her to my son. Did you agree to move your mother into a dark 400-square-foot storage basement, Ryan? Ryan shifted his weight, refusing to meet my eyes. Mom, it just seems efficient. The property is so big, and you're getting older. I didn't yell. I picked up the floor plan, folded it carefully in half, and set it back on the counter. When Arthur and I bought this 10-acre property in 1988, we worked 2 jobs each, I said softly. We slept 6 hours a night, repaired every shattered glass pane ourselves, and spent nearly 4 decades building Willow Creek into a brand trusted across this entire state. We did not bleed for all those years so our daughter-in-law could shove us into a basement storage locker while we are still breathing. When arrogant people build authority out of borrowed money and stolen effort, they develop a false sense of power. They mistake someone else's generosity for their own capability. But authority built on a foundation of empty pockets and unearned titles collapses the second the true owner asserts control. Without the real creator backing them up, their grand plans are nothing more than dust and smoke. You're making this emotional, Catherine, Melissa sneered, crossing her arms. It's just business. If you don't plan ahead, everyone loses. I have already planned ahead, I answered calmly. My estate planning was finalized years ago, but let me make my terms crystal clear today. If you attempt to pressure me, threaten me, or file a single frivolous motion against this nursery, I will personally terminate the $180,000 commercial supply contract tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And I will execute an immediate amendment to my will, deeding this entire 10-acre nursery property to the Botanical Preservation Foundation the moment I pass. You will not inherit a single acre, a single glass house, or a single dollar. Ryan's face went completely pale. Mom, you wouldn't do that. I absolutely would, I said. I am protecting my life's work from people who mistake kindness for weakness. A sharp gasp came from the doorway. Brittany stepped into the office, her eyes wide with shock. She looked at Melissa, then at me. Wait a minute, Brittany said, her voice trembling. Melissa, you told me Catherine offered me the loft. You told me she was lonely and desperately wanted me to move in to keep her company. Melissa spun around, her composure breaking. Brittany, quiet! We're handling this! No! Brittany yelled, tears welling in her eyes. You lied to me! You told me she invited me! You let me break my lease and pack my whole life into storage based on a lie so you could steal her business contract. Brittany looked at me with deep shame. Catherine, I am so sorry. I had no idea. Without waiting for another word, Brittany turned, grabbed her keys from the counter, and walked out to her car, slamming the door behind her. The legal documents lay abandoned on the counter. Melissa stood in the middle of the retail office alone, her face twisted in public humiliation as her hostile scheme completely imploded around her. She snatched her handbag, snapped her teeth shut, and fled toward the parking lot. 4 months passed, carrying away the humid heat of late summer and bringing in the crisp, chilly air of mid-November. The leaves on the massive red maple tree Arthur had planted beside the greenhouse 40 years ago had turned a brilliant, fiery crimson. One cold Tuesday evening, as dusk settled over Willow Creek Nursery, a quiet knock sounded at my office door. I opened it to find Ryan standing on the threshold alone. He looked thinner than he had in years, his coat unbuttoned, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The sharp, defensive posture he had carried while standing behind his wife was entirely gone. He looked at me with raw exhaustion, his eyes rimmed with red. "Mom," he said softly, his voice barely carrying over the autumn wind. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, gesturing toward the warm office. I poured 2 mugs of fresh, black coffee and set one across from him at the wooden desk. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The steam rose from our mugs in quiet white curls. "Melissa and I separated last month," Ryan finally confessed, staring down into his black coffee. "The divorce papers were filed on Friday." I took a slow sip, listening quietly. I felt no urge to say, "I told you so." The grief on my son's face was story enough. After the disaster at the office with those legal demand papers, everything crumbled, Ryan explained quietly. When she couldn't get her hands on the nursery's $180,000 commercial supply contract, she panicked. Without your $500 monthly subsidy to cover her personal credit cards, her event business went under in less than 60 days. She owed vendors across the county. When she realized there was no more free money to siphon off, the anger turned entirely on me. "She wanted me to sue you, Mom. She wanted me to fight Arthur's estate in court. And when I finally stood up and told her no, that I would never try to take my mother's life's work, she packed her bags." "How is Brittany?" I asked gently. Ryan managed a faint, genuine smile. "She moved into that lovely garden apartment complex you recommended 3 towns over. She found a quiet 2-bedroom unit with wonderful sunlight. She asked me to give you a letter." He reached into his coat and handed me a cream-colored envelope. "She says she's made more friends in 4 weeks than she did in 4 years, and she thanked you for opening her eyes to how Melissa was using her." Ryan swallowed hard, his hands tightening around his coffee mug. "I've rented a small 1-bedroom apartment across town. The lease starts on Saturday, but they're painting the walls this week. I was wondering, would it be all right if I stayed in the guest room above the tool garage for 3 nights? He paused, looking up with deep humility. "Just as a guest, Mom. I wouldn't dare assume anything else." I looked at my son, seeing the boy who used to run through these aisles with dirt on his knees, and the man who had finally learned the painful cost of passivity. "You may stay 3 nights, I said warmly, setting my cup down. "On one condition. The timber post on the southern nursery fence broke during last week's storm. You grab Arthur's toolbox from the shed tomorrow morning and fix it yourself." Relief washed over Ryan's face, his eyes filling with tears. "I'll fix the whole fence line, Mom." By Saturday afternoon, the nursery was alive with a light I hadn't felt in years. The autumn sun shone brightly through the glass panes of the main greenhouse. Tiny laughter echoed down the long aisles as 7-year-old Noah and 5-year-old Maya ran along the flagstone paths. They held small wooden trowels, eagerly potting delicate orchid seedlings into specialized bark mixes under my supervision. The 2 custodial trust accounts at First National Bank were continuing to grow quietly in the background, securing their college educations for the day they turned 18, safe from anyone's greed. Real victory in this life is never about destruction, revenge, or watching those who hurt you fall apart. True justice is quiet. It is the act of planting seeds in clean soil, protecting what you built with the person you loved, and maintaining a boundary so solid that only those who respect your dignity are ever welcomed inside. As evening approached, the children went inside with Ryan to wash up for dinner, I walked out to the yard and sat down on the old cedar bench beneath the red maple tree Arthur had planted when we were young and full of dreams. The air was cold, but the black coffee in my hands was hot. I looked up at the glowing glass house, the heavy brass locks on the doors reflecting the warm golden light of the setting sun. I still drink my coffee black. I still wake up at 5 every morning to tend the orchids. The sanctuary Arthur and I built remains standing, whole, unyielding, and entirely mine. If this story inspired you to stand firm in your boundaries, like and share this video, and subscribe for more emotional revenge audiobooks.